They ruled the galaxy until humanity took it back. Part 1 Captain Jake Morrison watched through the bridge windows as Earth burned below. The blue planet that had been humanity's home for millions of years was now covered in dark smoke and orange flames. Zephyrian ships hung in orbit like metal spiders, their crystal hulls gleaming in the light of the dying world. "Sir, we're getting reports from Luna Base," said Lieutenant Amy Foster, her voice shaking. "They're asking for immediate support." Morrison gripped the rail in front of him. Luna Base was humanity's last military stronghold. If it fell, there would be nowhere left to run. His small fleet of 12 ships was all that remained of Earth's once mighty navy. 50,000 humans were scattered across these vessels, refugees in space with nowhere to call home. "Admiral Harper is requesting all available ships to defend the moon," Foster continued. "She says they can hold for maybe 3 days. Morrison had served under Admiral Lisa Harper for 15 years. She was the smartest military leader he had ever known. If she said 3 days, she meant exactly that. No more, no less. The Zephyrians had been conquering the galaxy for over 1,000 years. They were tall, thin creatures made of living crystal. Their bodies could change shape and they could speak to each other with their minds across vast distances. Every species they encountered either joined their empire or was destroyed. There was no middle ground. Humans had fought them for 20 years. At first, it seemed like the war might be winnable. Human ships were fast and human pilots were clever. But the Zephyrians learned quickly. They adapted their technology and tactics with each battle. Slowly, system after system fell to their advance. "Sir, what are your orders?" asked Commander Alex Chen from the navigation station. Morrison looked at the tactical display. His 12 ships against the hundreds of Zephyrian vessels surrounding Earth and Luna. It would be a suicide mission. But leaving Admiral Harper and the 30,000 defenders on Luna Base felt like betrayal. "We're going in," Morrison said. "All ships, form attack formation. We'll hit their left flank and try to draw some heat away from Luna Base." The bridge crew exchanged worried glances, but no one questioned the order. They all knew this might be their last battle. Morrison's flagship, the cruiser Defiant, led the small fleet toward the moon. Behind him flew the destroyers Courage and Hope, along with 9 smaller ships carrying civilians and wounded soldiers. As they approached Luna Base, Morrison could see the massive Zephyrian assault ships hovering over the lunar surface. Energy. Beams lanced down from orbit, hitting the base's shields again and again. Each impact made the protective barrier flicker and weaken. "Incoming transmission from Admiral Harper," Foster announced. Harper's face appeared on the main screen. She looked tired and there was a cut on her forehead, but her eyes were still sharp and determined. "Jake, what are you doing here? I told you to take the civilians and run." "Not leaving you behind, Admiral," Morrison replied. "We're going to punch a hole in their formation and get you out of there." Harper shook her head. "There are too many of them. Luna Base can't be saved, but those 50,000 people on your ships can be. They're the future of humanity now." As if to prove her point, a massive explosion rocked Luna Base. One of the defensive towers had been destroyed. The base's shields were failing rapidly. "Admiral, we can make a run at their command ship," Morrison insisted. "If we can take it out, maybe we can turn this around." "No, Jake. Listen to me carefully. There's something you need to know." Harper's voice became urgent. 3 days ago, our science teams discovered something in the ruins of an old research station on Europa. Ancient technology, unlike anything we've ever seen. Dr. Nina Rodriguez was studying it when the attack began." Morrison frowned. He had never heard of Dr. Rodriguez, but Harper wasn't the type to waste time on unimportant details during a battle. "The technology isn't human," Harper continued. "It's old, maybe millions of years old. Rodriguez thinks it might be from a species that existed before the Zephyrians. And Jake, the really important part is that it responds to human neural patterns. Only human neural patterns." Another explosion shook Luna Base. The shields were down to 20% power. "Admiral, we need to go now, if we're going to save anyone," Chen called from his station. Harper nodded. "Jake, I'm transmitting Rodriguez's research data to your ship. Keep it safe. Find her if you can. This might be the key to beating the Zephyrians." Someday. Morrison watched as data streamed onto his ship's computers. Files about ancient ruins, strange energy signatures, and technology that seemed to read human thoughts. "Admiral, come with us," Morrison pleaded. "Your people need you." "My people need me to buy them time," Harper replied. "I'm staying here, with the volunteers. We'll hold them as long as we can while you escape." Morrison wanted to argue, but he could see the determination in Harper's eyes. She had made her choice. Around Luna Base, Zephyrian ships were closing in like a tightening noose. There wasn't much time left. "It's been an honor serving with you, Admiral," Morrison said quietly. "The honor was mine, Captain. Now go. Take care of our people." The transmission ended. Morrison stood on his bridge, watching as Luna Base's remaining defenses fought desperately against impossible odds. He knew Harper was right. His duty now was to the survivors, not to his own desire to stay and fight. "All ships, withdraw to jump distance," he ordered. "Plot a course for the outer rim. We'll regroup at the old mining station in the Kepler system." As the human fleet turned away from Earth, Morrison saw Luna Base's shields finally collapse. Zephyrian troops poured down from orbit while the base's defenders fought them street by street, room by room. Admiral Harper and her volunteers were buying precious minutes with their lives. Morrison's ships jumped into hyperspace just as Luna Base's reactor exploded. The flash of light was visible even at their distance, a final bright moment before darkness fell over humanity's birth world. In the cargo hold of the Defiant, 50,000 humans began the long journey into exile. They were all that remained of a species that had once dreamed of conquering the stars. Now they were refugees, fleeing into the unknown with nothing but hope and the mysterious data that Admiral Harper had died to protect. Morrison looked at the star charts, trying to decide where they could hide. The galaxy was vast, but the Zephyrian Empire controlled most of it. Finding a safe place would be difficult, but somewhere out there, Dr. Nina Rodriguez might still be alive. And if Admiral Harper was right, she might hold the key to humanity's survival. They ruled the galaxy until humanity took it back. Part 215 years had passed since Earth fell. Captain Jake Morrison, now promoted to Admiral, stood in the command center of Haven Station, a hidden base built inside a hollowed-out asteroid in the Kepler system. The walls were metal and rock, cold and gray. Nothing like the green fields and blue skies that the older humans still remembered from Earth. Around him, 50,000 human survivors had learned to live in the shadows. They moved from asteroid to asteroid, from dead system to dead system, always staying ahead of Zephyrian patrol ships. Children who had been born after the fall of Earth knew no other life than this constant hiding. "Admiral, Commander Chen's team is back from the scavenging run," reported Captain Amy Foster. She was thinner now than she had been 15 years ago, like all of them. Food was always scarce, and medical supplies even more so. Commander Alex. Chen entered the command center with his usual serious expression. Behind him walked a group of tired-looking humans carrying salvaged equipment and supplies. These scavenging missions were dangerous but necessary. They had to steal what they needed from abandoned stations and wrecked ships. "What did you find out there, Alex?" Morrison asked. Chen set down a data pad and rubbed his eyes. "The usual stuff. Some power cells, medical supplies, and food rations from a crashed freighter. But, Admiral, we found something else. Something big." Morrison raised an eyebrow. In 15 years of hiding, they had found very little that could be called big, in a good way. "There's a rogue planet about 3 days from here," Chen continued. "No star, just floating in empty space. Our sensors picked up some kind of energy signature coming from the surface. It's not natural, and it's not Zephyrian." Foster leaned forward. "Could be a trap. The Zephyrians have been getting better at finding our hiding spots." "I don't think so," Chen said. "The energy pattern is old, really old, and it matches some of the readings in Admiral Harper's data about that ancient technology." Morrison felt his heart beat faster. Admiral Harper's research data had been their most closely guarded secret for 15 years. Dr. Nina Rodriguez had been studying something called precursor technology before Earth fell. But Rodriguez herself had vanished during the chaos of the invasion. Many people assumed she was dead. "Show me the readings," Morrison said. Chen activated a holographic display that showed the rogue planet spinning slowly in empty space. It was about the size of Mars, dark and cold with no atmosphere. But deep scans revealed something unusual under the surface. "There," Chen pointed to a cluster of geometric shapes buried beneath the planet's crust. "Those aren't natural formations. They're artificial structures, maybe buildings or machinery, and they're giving off the same type of energy that Rodriguez was studying on Europa." Morrison studied the display carefully. After 15 years of running and hiding, any chance of finding an advantage against the Zephyrians was worth investigating, but he couldn't risk the lives of 50,000 people on a wild guess. "How many ships would we need for a reconnaissance mission?" he asked. 2 or 3, Chen replied. "Small, fast ships that can get in and out quickly if there's trouble." Morrison made his decision. "Take the Scouts, Ranger, and Swift, volunteers only. If this is a precursor site, we need to know what's down there." 3 days later, Chen's small expedition reached the rogue planet. The world was completely dark, lit only by the distant glow of stars. Their ships landed near the energy source, and teams of humans in environmental suits began exploring the underground structures. What they found amazed them. Vast halls carved from living rock, filled with machinery that hummed with quiet power, even after millions of years. The architecture was unlike anything humans or Zephyrians had ever built. Everything was curved and flowing, as if the builders had grown their technology instead of constructing it. But the biggest surprise was waiting in the deepest chamber. "Hello?" said a familiar voice as the exploration team entered the main laboratory. "I was wondering when someone would finally find this place." Dr. Nina Rodriguez stepped out of the shadows. She looked older than she should have after 15 years, her hair completely gray and her face lined with exhaustion. But her eyes were bright with intelligence and excitement. "Dr. Rodriguez?" Chen stared at her in shock. "Everyone thought you were dead." "Nearly was, several times," Rodriguez replied with a tired smile. "I escaped from Europa just before the Zephyrians arrived. I've been here ever since, studying this place and learning about the precursors." She led them deeper into the facility, past machines that none of them could understand. The walls were covered with symbols and diagrams that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. The precursors were the original rulers of this galaxy, Rodriguez explained as they walked. They had an empire that lasted for millions of years, long before the Zephyrians evolved. But they didn't conquer other species like the Zephyrians do. They were teachers and guides. What happened to them? Asked Lieutenant Marcus Webb, Chen's chief engineer. They transcended, Rodriguez said simply. They evolved beyond physical form and moved to a higher plane of existence. But before they left, they prepared for what was coming. They reached the central laboratory, a vast circular chamber filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with soft blue light. At the center stood a chair-like device covered in neural interface cables. They knew that someday a species like the Zephyrians would arise, Rodriguez continued. Conquerors who used psychic domination to control others. So they built weapons, specifically designed to fight that kind of enemy. Chen approached one of the crystal structures carefully. What kind of weapons? Neural amplifiers, Rodriguez replied. The Zephyrians control their empire through collective consciousness. They can link minds across vast distances and dominate the thoughts of other species. But humans are different. She activated a control panel, and the crystals began to glow, brighter. Human neural patterns are chaotic, unpredictable. The Zephyrians have trouble reading our minds or controlling our thoughts. The precursors built these devices to amplify that natural resistance. A human connected to this technology becomes invisible to Zephyrian psychic abilities. Webb whistled softly. That would be a huge advantage. But can we build more of these devices? Better than that, Rodriguez said. The precursors left detailed instructions for creating portable versions. We can build neural enhancement units that fit inside a helmet or a suit of armor. Every human soldier could become immune to Zephyrian mind control. Chen felt a surge of hope for the first time in 15 years. Dr. Rodriguez, does this technology work? Have you tested it? Rodriguez smiled and gestured to the chair in the center of the room. I've been connected to the main amplifier for 15 years. During that time, I've learned to do things that would amaze you. Watch. She approached a control panel covered in precursor symbols. Instead of touching the controls, she simply looked at them with intense concentration. The machines responded to her thoughts, bringing up holographic displays and status reports. With the neural amplifier, I can interface directly with precursor technology, she explained. But more importantly, I can disrupt Zephyrian control systems, their ships, their weapons, their communication networks. They all depend on psychic links that humans can now break. Chen realized what this meant. For 15 years, humanity had been running and hiding, slowly dying out as their numbers dwindled and their hope faded. But now they had found something that could change everything. Dr. Rodriguez, he said, how quickly can you teach us to build these neural amplifiers? The portable units will take time to perfect, she replied. But I can show you how to build basic psychic dampeners within a few weeks. And Chen, there's something else you need to know. She led them to another display showing a galaxy-wide map. Hundreds of red dots marked Zephyrian-controlled systems, but scattered among them were small blue dots. These are other hidden settlements, Rodriguez explained. Species that escaped Zephyrian conquest and went into hiding, just like humanity did. Some have been free for centuries. If we can contact them and share this technology, we might be able to build an alliance. Chen looked at the map and felt something he hadn't experienced since Earth fell. Hope for the future. They weren't alone in the galaxy, and they weren't helpless anymore. The precursors had given them weapons to fight back. It was time to stop running. They ruled the galaxy until humanity took it back. Part 3 Doctor. Nina Rodriguez stood before a room full of human engineers and scientists, holding a small device that looked like a metallic headband. 3 months had passed since Commander Chen's team found her on the rogue planet, and she had been working day and night to create portable versions of the precursor neural technology. "This is what will change everything," she said, placing the device on her head. "A neural enhancement interface that any human can wear." The engineers leaned forward to get a better look. Among them sat Marcus Webb, Chen's chief engineer, and Sam Torres, a young scientist who had volunteered to help with the project. They had all seen Rodriguez demonstrate the large precursor machines, but this was the first time they would see the portable version in action. "The headband connects directly to your nervous system," Rodriguez explained. "It amplifies your natural resistance to psychic interference and allows you to interface with electronic systems using only your thoughts." She gestured toward a Zephyrian control panel that Chen's team had salvaged from a destroyed patrol ship. The crystalline surface was covered with alien symbols that shifted and changed colors. "Normally, only a Zephyrian can operate this console," Rodriguez said. "Their psychic abilities allow them to communicate with their technology on a mental level. But watch what happens when a human with neural enhancement tries to use it." Rodriguez focused her attention on the console. The alien symbols began to glow and change, responding to her thoughts instead of Zephyrian mental commands. Within seconds, she had accessed the ship's navigation logs and communication records. "Incredible," Webb muttered. "You're actually controlling their technology." "More than that," Rodriguez replied. "I'm rewriting the control protocols. Any Zephyrian who tries to use this console now will find that it no longer responds to their commands." The implications were staggering. If humans could take control of Zephyrian technology, they could turn the aliens' own weapons against them. But first, they needed to test the neural enhancement devices in real combat. 2 weeks later, pilot Katie Sullivan volunteered for the first field test. She was 28 years old and had been flying combat missions since she was 16. Like many humans her age, she had grown up in the aftermath of Earth's destruction and had never known a time when humanity wasn't fighting for survival. "Are you sure about this, Katie?" asked Admiral Morrison as technicians fitted the neural headband onto her pilot helmet. "We don't know what might happen if something goes wrong." Sullivan checked her harness and controls one more time. "Sir, we've been running from the Zephyrians for 15 years. If this technology can help us fight back, then it's worth the risk." The target was a lone Zephyrian destroyer that had been detected near the edge of the system. Intelligence reports suggested it was conducting a routine patrol, which meant it would be operating with minimal crew and defenses. Perfect for a test mission. Sullivan's fighter launched from Haven Station and accelerated toward the enemy ship. As she approached, her neural enhancement device began to activate. She could feel a strange tingling sensation in her mind, as if her thoughts were becoming clearer and more focused. "Target acquired," she reported over the radio. "Beginning approach." The Zephyrian destroyer was a sleek, crystalline vessel about the size of a human cruiser. Its hull reflected starlight in prismatic patterns, and energy weapons bristled along its surface. Normally, a single fighter would have no chance against such a ship. But as Sullivan got closer, something amazing happened. The neural enhancement device allowed her to see the destroyer's electronic systems. She could sense the flow of data through its computers, the pulse of energy through its weapons, and most importantly, the psychic network that connected the ship to the rest of the Zephyrian fleet. "I can feel their communication system," Sullivan reported, her voice filled with wonder. "It's like listening to a conversation in another room." She focused her enhanced mind on the destroyer's navigation system. Instead of trying to damage the ship with weapons, she began to rewrite its flight control software. The process was surprisingly easy. The Zephyrian systems seemed to welcome her mental contact. On board the destroyer, the alien crew began to panic as their ship stopped, responding to commands. The bridge displays showed impossible readings, and the navigation computer started plotting a course directly into the nearest asteroid field. "What's happening?" Sullivan heard Admiral Morrison ask over the radio. "I'm in control of their ship," she replied, hardly believing it herself. "Their computers think I'm a Zephyrian commander giving orders. I can make this ship do whatever I want." To prove her point, Sullivan commanded the destroyer to lower its shields and power down its weapons. The great warship, which could have destroyed an entire human fleet, became as helpless as a civilian transport. "This is incredible," said Dr. Rodriguez, who was monitoring the test from Haven Station. "The neural enhancement is allowing Katie to override their command protocols completely." Sullivan could have destroyed the destroyer easily at that point, but she had a better idea. Instead of killing the crew, she reprogrammed the ship's life support systems to release sleeping gas throughout the vessel. Within minutes, every Zephyrian on board was unconscious. "Target neutralized," Sullivan reported. "No casualties on either side." The unconscious Zephyrians were transported to a secure facility where they could be questioned about fleet movements and battle plans. But more importantly, the humans now had a fully functional enemy destroyer to study and reverse engineer. Dr. Rodriguez and her team spent weeks analyzing the captured ship. They learned that Zephyrian technology was almost entirely dependent on psychic interfaces. The aliens had never needed to build security systems to prevent unauthorized access because they assumed only other Zephyrians would be able to operate their equipment. "It's their greatest strength and their greatest weakness," Rodriguez explained to Admiral Morrison and his senior staff. "Their entire civilization is built on shared consciousness and psychic unity. They literally cannot imagine someone thinking differently than they do." Commander Chen studied the technical specifications of the captured destroyer. "If we can build more neural enhancement devices, we could take control of entire fleets." "That's exactly what we're going to do," Morrison replied. "But first, we need to share this technology with other resistance groups. It's time to stop fighting alone." Using the captured destroyer's communication system, the humans began sending encrypted messages to the hidden settlements that Dr. Rodriguez had identified. Many of the alien species were skeptical at first. They had been hiding from the Zephyrians for decades or even centuries, and the idea of fighting back seemed impossible. But when human volunteers demonstrated the neural enhancement technology in person, attitudes began to change. The Draconians, a reptilian species that had lost their homeworld 50 years earlier, were the first to agree to an alliance. Their military leader, General Thraktar, had been fighting a guerrilla war against the Zephyrians ever since his people's exile. "Your species offers hope where there was none before," Thraktar told Morrison during their first meeting. "The Zephyrians have ruled through fear for too long. It is time to show them that they are not invincible." Other species quickly followed. The insectoid Kirathi, the aquatic cephalons, and the energy-based Luminari all sent representatives to join the growing alliance. Each species brought their own unique abilities and knowledge to the resistance. But the real breakthrough came when Dr. Rodriguez figured out how to mass-produce the neural enhancement devices. Using precursor manufacturing, techniques and materials from the captured Zephyrian ships, her team could now build hundreds of headbands per week. Every human who wears one of these becomes a potential weapon against the Zephyrian Empire, she explained to a gathering of resistance leaders. We can turn their own technology against them, disrupt their communications, and break the psychic bonds that hold their empire together. Admiral Morrison looked around the room at representatives from a dozen different species, all united in their determination to fight back against their oppressors. For the first time since Earth's fall, he believed that victory might actually be possible. The Zephyrians have ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years, he said, but they've never faced an enemy like us. They've never faced humans. The age of hiding was over. The resistance was ready to fight back. They ruled the galaxy until humanity took it back. Part 4. The news spread through the galaxy's underground networks like wildfire. Humans had captured a Zephyrian destroyer without firing a single shot. For the first time in 1,000 years, someone had proven that the crystal-skinned overlords could be defeated. Admiral Morrison stood in the main hangar of Liberation Base, the Resistance's new headquarters built inside a massive asteroid in the Veil Nebula. Around him, ships from dozens of different species were docked side by side. Draconian fighters sat next to human scouts, while Kirathi transports shared space with Cephalon submarines converted for space travel. The response has been beyond our wildest hopes, reported Captain Amy Foster, who now served as Morrison's intelligence chief. We're getting contact requests from resistance cells in every sector, some groups we didn't even know existed. Morrison nodded as he watched alien engineers working alongside humans to retrofit captured Zephyrian equipment. The neural enhancement technology had changed everything. What once seemed impossible now felt inevitable. Sir, General Thraktar requests a meeting, Foster continued. He says the Draconian High Command is ready to commit their entire fleet to the Alliance. The Draconians had been the first alien species to join the human-led resistance. Their homeworld had been conquered 50 years ago, but they had managed to evacuate most of their population to hidden bases in dead systems. General Thraktar was a veteran warrior who understood the value of the human neural technology. Morrison found Thraktar in the strategy room, studying holographic displays of Zephyrian fleet positions. The Draconian general was 8 feet tall with green scales and yellow eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. Despite his fearsome appearance, Morrison had found him to be a thoughtful and honorable ally. Admiral Morrison, Thraktar said, in his deep, gravelly voice. I have news from the outer systems. 3 more Zephyrian patrol groups have gone missing in the past week. Morrison smiled grimly. Those missing patrols were the result of human-led teams using neural enhancement devices to capture enemy ships. The operations were small, but highly effective, and they were starting to worry the Zephyrian High Command. They're changing their patrol patterns, Thraktar continued. Moving to larger groups and avoiding areas where ships have disappeared. They're scared, Admiral. For the first time in their history, they're actually afraid. Good, Morrison replied. Fear makes people make mistakes, and we need the Zephyrians to make mistakes if we're going to have any chance in a direct fight. The resistance had grown rapidly over the past 6 months. What started as 50,000 human refugees had become an alliance of over 2 million, beings from dozens of species. But they were still vastly outnumbered by the Zephyrian Empire, which controlled hundreds of billions of subjects across thousands of star systems. There's something else, Thraktar said, his expression becoming more serious. Our spies report that the Zephyrians are planning a major operation. They're massing fleets in the core systems for what they call a final cleansing of resistance activities. Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. The Zephyrians had been content to use patrol ships and small task forces against the resistance so far, but if they were bringing in major fleet elements, it meant they were taking the threat seriously. "How long do we have?" Morrison asked. "Perhaps 3 months," Thraktar replied. "Maybe less. They're moving slowly and carefully, but when they come, it will be with overwhelming force." Morrison realized that the time for small raids and guerrilla attacks was ending. The resistance would have to prove itself in a real battle against a major Zephyrian force. If they lost, the rebellion would be crushed, and all the progress they had made would be for nothing. "We need a victory," Morrison said. "Something big enough to show the galaxy that the Zephyrians can be beaten in open battle." "I agree," Thraktar said. "But what target would be suitable? Most Zephyrian strongholds are too heavily defended for our current forces." Morrison studied the tactical displays for several minutes, looking for an opportunity. Then he noticed something interesting in the intelligence reports from the Vega system. "What about Vega 7?" he asked, pointing to a planet on the edge of Zephyrian space. "It's a mining world with relatively light defenses, but it supplies rare metals to half the Empire's shipyards." Thraktar examined the data more closely. "The orbital defenses are manageable," he agreed. 2 battle stations and a squadron of cruisers. "But, Admiral, the planet has over 10 million inhabitants. If we attack, the Zephyrians might retaliate against the civilian population." Morrison had been thinking about that problem ever since. Dr. Rodriguez perfected the neural enhancement technology. The resistance couldn't just destroy Zephyrian facilities, they needed to liberate them. Otherwise, they would be no better than the Empire they were fighting against. "We're not going to attack the planet," Morrison said. "We're going to liberate it." He activated a communication terminal and sent out an encrypted message to resistance cells throughout the galaxy. Within hours, volunteer ships were converging on Liberation Base from dozens of systems. Human crews worked alongside Draconian engineers, Kirathi pilots trained with Cephalon navigators, and luminary energy specialists shared knowledge with everyone who would listen. The operation began. 3 weeks later, Morrison commanded a fleet of 60 ships, including captured Zephyrian vessels crewed by humans with neural enhancement devices. The plan was ambitious. They would jump into the Vega system, neutralize the orbital defenses, and then use propaganda, broadcasts to convince the planetary population to join the rebellion. Lieutenant Ben Parker led the first wave of attack ships into the system. Parker was one of the youngest pilots in the human fleet, but he had shown exceptional skill with the neural enhancement technology. His squadron of modified fighters approached the Zephyrian battle stations with their weapons powered down. "Remember, we want to capture those stations intact," Morrison reminded his pilots over the communication system. "The goal is to turn their own defenses against them." Parker's enhanced mind reached out to the battle station's computer systems as his fighter drew closer. The process was becoming routine now. Human neural patterns could slip past Zephyrian security like they didn't exist. Within minutes, he had taken control of the station's weapons and shields. "Battle Station 1 is under our control," Parker reported. "Zephyrian crew is being transferred to holding cells." The same thing happened at the second battle station. Pilot Maria Santos used her neural interface to override the facility's command systems, leaving the Zephyrian defenders helpless as Resistance Marines boarded their vessel. But the real test came when they faced the Zephyrian cruiser squadron. These ships had full crews and would be much harder to capture than automated defense platforms. Commander Alex Chen led a team of 12 human pilots in captured Zephyrian fighters. Their job was to get close enough to the enemy cruisers to establish neural links with the ship's computer systems. "Stay in formation," Chen ordered as they approached the first cruiser. "Remember, these ships have living crews who can adapt to our attacks." The Zephyrian cruiser captain was indeed adapting. Instead of relying on automated systems, he was giving orders manually and using backup communication methods that bypassed the ship's main computers. But Chen had anticipated this problem. Instead of trying to take control of the cruiser's primary systems, he focused on smaller, secondary functions: environmental controls, internal communications, navigation sensors, all the little things that kept a ship running efficiently. One by one, the cruiser's systems began to malfunction. The air circulation shut down, internal communication failed, and the navigation displays showed false readings. The Zephyrian crew found themselves fighting their own ship instead of the human attackers. "Enemy squadron is surrendering," Chen reported with satisfaction. "All ships captured with minimal casualties." With the orbital defenses under resistance control, Morrison's main fleet moved toward Vega 7 itself. The planet was covered in mining facilities and industrial complexes that supplied the Zephyrian war machine. But more importantly, it was home to millions of enslaved beings from dozens of different species. This is Admiral Morrison of the Galactic Liberation Alliance. He broadcast on all frequencies. "We are here to offer you freedom from Zephyrian rule. Any being who wishes to join us will be welcomed as an equal partner in the fight for galactic liberation." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Factory workers put down their tools. Mine supervisors opened their facilities to resistance. Forces and enslaved beings of every species imaginable came forward to volunteer for the rebellion. Within 48 hours, Vega 7 had been completely liberated. The planet's industrial capacity was turned toward building ships and weapons for the resistance, while its population provided millions of new recruits for the growing alliance. But most importantly, the liberation of Vega 7 proved that the resistance could win major victories against Zephyrian forces. News of the battle spread throughout the galaxy, inspiring new uprisings on dozens of worlds. General Thraktar found Morrison on the bridge of his flagship as they prepared to leave the Vega system. They ruled the galaxy until humanity took it back. Part 5 Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of his flagship, the captured Zephyrian dreadnought Freedom's Call, as it emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Alpha Centauri system. Before him stretched the most heavily defended Zephyrian stronghold outside the core worlds. 3 planets, dozens of space stations, and enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. 6 months had passed since the liberation of Vega 7, and the rebellion had grown beyond Morrison's wildest dreams. What started as scattered resistance cells had become a coordinated alliance of over 50 million beings from hundreds of species, but now they faced their greatest test yet. "Enemy fleet composition confirmed," reported Captain Amy Foster from the tactical station. 47 Zephyrian warships, including 3 super dreadnoughts. Orbital defense platforms around all 3 planets. This is going to be the biggest battle since the resistance began. Morrison studied the tactical display with a mixture of determination and worry. His own fleet numbered 38 ships, most of them captured Zephyrian vessels operated by human crews with neural enhancement devices. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they had advantages that the enemy didn't understand. "Signal from General Thraktar," Foster announced. "The Draconian assault fleet is in position and ready to begin the attack." Morrison nodded. The battle plan was complex but necessary. While the main human fleet engaged the Zephyrian Navy, Draconian and Kirathi ground forces would assault the planetary defense systems. Meanwhile, teams of enhanced humans would attempt to capture key Zephyrian command vessels intact. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison, he broadcast to his fleet. Today we proved that the age of Zephyrian dominance is ending. Every being in the galaxy is watching to see if freedom can triumph over tyranny. Let's show them what liberation looks like. The first phase of the battle began when Commander Alex Chen led a squadron of 12 fighters toward the Zephyrian perimeter. His pilots were all equipped with the latest neural enhancement devices, allowing them to interface directly with enemy computer systems. Beginning electronic warfare operations, Chen reported as his fighters approached the first line of enemy ships, attempting to disrupt their communication network. The Zephyrians had learned some lessons from previous defeats. Their fleet commander had ordered all ships to maintain radio silence and use backup communication systems that bypass their main computers. But Chen and his pilots had been training for months to overcome these countermeasures. Instead of trying to take control of entire ships, they focused on smaller, more vulnerable systems. Navigation sensors, weapons targeting computers, and life support systems all relied on the same basic technology that could be influenced by human neural patterns. 1. By one, Zephyrian ships began to experience equipment failures. Weapons that should have locked onto human fighters instead fired at empty space. Navigation systems showed false readings that sent ships off course. Communication arrays broadcast static instead of orders. "Excellent work, Alex," Morrison said, over the radio. "You're buying us the confusion we need." The main battle began when Morrison's heavy ships engaged the Zephyrian battle line. The Freedom's Call, despite being originally built by the enemy, had been completely retrofitted with human-operated systems. Pilot Ryan Clark, one of the most experienced neural interface users in the fleet, served as the ship's primary weapons coordinator. "Target the lead super dreadnought," Morrison ordered. "We need to take out their command ship early." Clark focused his enhanced mind on the enemy vessel's defensive systems. The Zephyrian super dreadnought was massive, nearly 2 kilometers, long and bristling with energy weapons. But like all Zephyrian technology, its systems were designed to respond to psychic commands. "I'm reading their shield frequency," Clark reported, "adjusting our weapons to match." The Freedom's Call's main guns fired in perfect synchronization, their energy beams calibrated to exploit a weakness in the enemy ship's defenses. The Zephyrian super dreadnought's shields flickered and failed, leaving its hull exposed to further attack. But the enemy wasn't giving up easily. The Zephyrian fleet commander, realizing that his ship's computers were being compromised, ordered all vessels to switch to manual control. Suddenly, the neural enhancement advantages that had given the Resistance so many easy victories became much less effective. "They're adapting faster than we expected," Foster warned Morrison. "Enemy ships are operating independently now. We're losing our electronic warfare edge." Morrison watched as several human ships took heavy damage from Zephyrian weapons fire. The captured enemy vessels were powerful, but they were still outnumbered. Without the ability to turn the Zephyrians' own technology against them, this battle would come down to raw firepower and tactical skill. That's when Morrison remembered something that Colonel Pete Williams had told him years ago, back when they were both young officers serving under Admiral Harper. Williams was now his closest friend and most trusted advisor, commanding the heavy cruiser Determination. "Sometimes you can't be clever," Williams had said. "Sometimes you just have to be brave." "Pete," Morrison called over the communication system, "I need you to take your ship and ram that super dreadnought." Can you do it? There was a long pause before Williams responded. Copy that, Admiral. It's been an honor serving with you. Morrison watched as the Determination broke formation and accelerated directly toward the enemy flagship. Zephyrian weapons. Fire concentrated on the human cruiser, but Williams kept his ship on course despite the damage it was taking. For Earth! Williams shouted over the radio as his ship collided with the Zephyrian super dreadnought at full speed. The explosion was visible from across the star system. Both ships were destroyed instantly, taking the Zephyrian fleet commander and most of his senior staff with them. The enemy formation wavered as surviving ships struggled to establish a new command structure. Morrison felt a deep sadness at the loss of his friend, but he knew that Williams's sacrifice had given them the opening they needed. All ships, concentrate. Fire on the remaining super dreadnoughts. Let's finish this. The battle raged for 8 more hours. Human and alien crews fought with desperate courage against an enemy that had ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years. Ships were lost on both sides, and the space around Alpha Centauri became filled with debris and drifting life pods. But gradually, the resistance forces began to gain the upper hand. Enhanced human pilots continued to disrupt Zephyrian systems. Despite the enemy's countermeasures, Draconian assault teams captured key orbital platforms. Karathi fighters used their natural agility to outmaneuver the larger Zephyrian vessels. The turning point came when pilot Maria Santos managed to board and capture one of the remaining Zephyrian super dreadnoughts. Using her neural interface, she took control of the massive ship's weapons and turned them against the rest of the enemy fleet. "This is Santos aboard the captured super dreadnought Vindication," she reported. "I have control of all primary systems. Engaging remaining enemy vessels." The sight of a Zephyrian super dreadnought firing on its own fleet was too much for the enemy's morale. One by one, Zephyrian ships began to surrender or retreat. Within an hour, the once mighty fleet was either destroyed or fleeing toward the core worlds. Morrison stood on his bridge, looking out at the debris field that had once been the Zephyrian Sector Command. 3 star systems had been liberated, and over 50 million beings were now free from alien rule. But the victory had come at a terrible cost. "Casualty reports, Amy," he said quietly. Foster consulted her datapad with a grim expression. 14 ships lost, including the Determination, over 3,000 killed in action. "But Admiral, we captured 21 enemy vessels and liberated the entire Alpha Centauri sector." Morrison nodded slowly. Every life lost was a tragedy, but Pete Williams and the others had died for something important. They had proven that the Zephyrian Empire could be defeated in open battle by an alliance of free peoples. "Send word to all resistance cells throughout the galaxy," Morrison ordered. "The Zephyrians are not invincible. Today we proved that courage and determination can overcome any oppressor." As news of the Alpha Centauri victory spread, uprisings began on dozens of worlds. The Zephyrian Empire, which had seemed unshakable just a year ago, was starting to crack under the pressure of galactic rebellion. But Morrison knew that the hardest fighting was still ahead. The enemy would not give up their empire without a desperate final battle. And that battle would have to be fought in the core worlds themselves, where the Zephyrians were strongest. Standing on the bridge of his flagship, Morrison looked out at the stars and thought about his friend Pete Williams. The colonel had been right. Sometimes you couldn't be clever. Sometimes you just had to be brave. And humanity, along with all the species fighting for freedom, would need all the bravery they could muster for the battles yet to come. They ruled the galaxy until humanity took it back. Part 6 months after the victory at Alpha Centauri, the galaxy was on fire. Captain Amy Foster stood in the war room of Liberation Command, watching holographic displays that showed rebellion, breaking out across hundreds of star systems. Red lights indicated Zephyrian-controlled worlds, but there were fewer of them every day as green lights marked newly liberated systems. "Report from the Vega sector," announced Lieutenant Luke Hayes, the young communications officer who had become one of their most reliable intelligence analysts. "Captain Foster's assault fleet has successfully liberated the industrial worlds of Vega Prime and Vega 3. The orbital shipyards are now producing vessels for the Alliance." Foster smiled at the news, though she felt tired after months of constant warfare. The rebellion had grown far beyond what anyone had imagined possible. What started as 50,000 human refugees was now a galactic alliance of over 200 million free beings from hundreds of different species. "Any word from the Tau Ceti operation?" she asked. Hayes checked his data pad. "Commander Luke, Hayes reports that his teams have successfully captured the Zephyrian research facilities on Tau Ceti 4. They've recovered significant intelligence about enemy fleet movements and weapons development. The Resistance had learned to fight on multiple fronts simultaneously. While major fleet actions grabbed attention, smaller teams of enhanced humans were constantly infiltrating Zephyrian facilities to gather intelligence and sabotage critical systems. Dr. Nina Rodriguez entered the war room carrying a portable neural enhancement device that looked much more advanced than the simple headbands they had started with. Over the past year, she had continued to refine the precursor technology, making it more powerful and easier to use. "Admiral Morrison is asking for a status update on the new enhancement units," Rodriguez said, setting the device on the central table. "How are the field tests going?" "Better than expected," Foster replied. "The portable peace-eye jammers are working perfectly. Lieutenant Carol Rodriguez's team used them to disable an entire Zephyrian communication network on Proxima Station." Carol Rodriguez was Nina's daughter, a young woman who had inherited her mother's genius for understanding alien technology. She had developed portable versions of the neural enhancement devices that ordinary resistance fighters could use without extensive training. "The key breakthrough was miniaturization," Rodriguez explained. "These new units can be built into a standard combat helmet or even a wristband. Every soldier in the Alliance can now carry psychic jamming equipment." Foster studied the device carefully. It was about the size of a smartphone and covered with the flowing organic patterns that marked all precursor technology. But unlike the large installations on the rogue planet, this device could be operated by anyone with basic training. "How many can we produce per week?" Foster asked. "About 5,000, Rodriguez replied. "But that number is growing as we capture more Zephyrian manufacturing facilities and convert them to our purposes." The war room's main display suddenly lit up with an urgent message. Admiral Morrison's face appeared on the screen, transmitted from his flagship somewhere in the Outer Rim territories. "Amy, I need you to prepare for a major operation," Morrison said without preamble. "Intelligence suggests that the Zephyrians are planning a massive counterattack. They're pulling ships from garrison duty all across the galaxy and massing them in the core systems." Foster felt a chill run down her spine. The core systems were the heart of the Zephyrian Empire, containing their most important worlds and strongest defenses. If the enemy was concentrating their forces there, it meant they were preparing for a decisive battle. "How long do we have?" Foster asked. "Perhaps 6 weeks," Morrison replied. "Maybe less. The Zephyrians have been losing ground for months, but they still control the most heavily populated and industrialized systems in the galaxy. If they can defeat our main fleets in a single decisive battle, they might be able to crush the rebellion. Foster understood the implications. The resistance had been successful so far because it fought the enemy piecemeal, never allowing the Zephyrians to bring their full strength to bear. But now the aliens were forcing a confrontation that would determine the fate of the entire galaxy. "What's our strategy?" Foster asked. Morrison's expression became grim. "We're going to hit them before they're ready. Every ship, every soldier, every enhanced human in the Alliance is going to converge on the core systems. It's all or nothing." Over the following weeks, the greatest armada in galactic history began to assemble. Human ships joined with Draconian, battle cruisers, Karathi assault vessels, Cephalon submarines converted for space warfare, and dozens of other vessel types from species that had never worked together before. General Thraktar arrived at Liberation Command with news from his scouts. The massive Draconian looked even more serious than usual as he studied the intelligence reports. "The Zephyrians have assembled over 800 ships in the Polaris system," he reported to Foster and Rodriguez. 300 of them are Dreadnought class, or larger. They're calling it the Final Purge Fleet. Foster whistled softly. 800 ships was more firepower than the Resistance had faced in all their previous battles combined. Even with their neural enhancement advantages, those were daunting odds. "There's more," Thraktar continued. "Our spies report that the Zephyrians have developed new countermeasures against neural interference. They're using organic computer systems that are harder for enhanced humans to affect." Rodriguez frowned as she studied the technical specifications. "Organic computers? That's clever. Biological systems don't respond to psychic manipulation the same way crystalline matrices do." "Can we overcome these countermeasures?" Foster asked. "Possibly," Rodriguez replied. "But it will require a new approach. Instead of trying to control their systems directly, we'll need to disrupt the connections between different components." She activated a holographic display showing the internal structure of a Zephyrian ship. "Their vessels still rely on the psychic network for coordination between different systems. If we can jam those mental links, their ships will lose the ability to function as integrated units." Foster realized what Rodriguez was suggesting. "You're talking about turning their greatest strength against them. Their collective consciousness becomes a vulnerability if we can disrupt it." "Exactly," Rodriguez said, "but it will require our most skilled, enhanced humans working in perfect coordination, and the range is limited. They'll need to get very close to enemy ships." The plan that emerged was audacious and dangerous. Teams of enhanced humans would use small, fast ships to penetrate the Zephyrian battle line. Once inside the enemy formation, they would activate high-powered SI jammers that would disrupt the psychic networks, holding the alien fleet together. Captain Tony Mitchell volunteered to lead one of the penetration teams. Mitchell was a veteran, engineer who had been working on enhanced neural interfaces since the early days of the Resistance. His technical knowledge made him perfect for the complex jamming operation. "I'll need 12 volunteers," Mitchell told Foster during the final briefing. "People who can handle the advanced neural enhancement equipment and won't panic when surrounded by enemy ships." Foster looked around the room at the assembled resistance fighters. These men and women represented dozens of different species and backgrounds, but they were all united by their determination to end Zephyrian rule. "I'll go," said Lieutenant Carol Rodriguez, stepping forward despite her mother's worried expression. "Count me in," added Commander Luke Hayes, the communications specialist who had proven himself in dozens of intelligence operations. One by one, other volunteers stepped forward. Pilots, engineers, soldiers, and scientists all willing to risk their lives for the chance to strike a decisive blow against the Empire. Within days, the massive resistance fleet was ready to depart for the core systems. Admiral Morrison's flagship, the super dreadnought Liberty's Dawn, led a formation of over 400 vessels. It was the largest fleet ever assembled by free peoples in galactic history. But as they prepared to jump into hyperspace, Foster couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading toward the most important battle in the history of the galaxy. Everything they had fought for, everyone who had died for freedom, it all came down to what would happen in the core systems. "All ships prepare for hyperspace jump," came Morrison's voice over the communication system. "Today we end 1,000 years of tyranny. Today we take back the galaxy." As the fleet disappeared into hyperspace, Foster said a silent prayer for everyone who would not survive the coming battle. But she also felt a surge of hope. Humanity and its allies had come so far from the dark days after Earth's fall. Now they had a real chance to win their freedom. The final battle was about to begin. They ruled the galaxy until humanity took it back. Part 7. The massive resistance fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Polaris system like an avenging angel made of metal and energy. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the super dreadnought, Liberty's Dawn, watching as 400 Allied ships took formation around his flagship. Before them lay the heart of the Zephyrian Empire and the most heavily defended system in the galaxy. "Enemy fleet detected," reported Captain Amy Foster from the tactical station. 837 vessels, arranged in defensive, formation around Zephyr Prime. "They're not running this time, Admiral. They're ready for a fight." Morrison studied the holographic display showing the Zephyrian homeworld. Zephyr Prime was a crystal planet, its surface covered in the geometric cities and towering spires that the aliens preferred. Orbital platforms and defense stations ringed the world like a protective shell, while the massive enemy fleet formed layers of protection extending millions of kilometers into space. "Signal from the Zephyrian High Command," announced Lieutenant Luke Hayes from the communications console. "They're demanding our immediate surrender." Morrison almost smiled at that. After a year of defeats and lost territory, the Zephyrians still believed that other species should automatically submit to their will. They had ruled the galaxy for so long that they couldn't imagine any other outcome. "No reply," Morrison ordered. "Let our actions speak for us." The battle plan was complex and dangerous. While the main fleet engaged the Zephyrian Navy in conventional combat, small teams of enhanced humans would penetrate the enemy formation using fast ships equipped with advanced psi-jammers. Their job was to disrupt the psychic network that held the alien empire together. "All assault teams prepare for launch," Morrison broadcast to the Special Operations Unit scattered throughout his fleet. "Remember, you need to get within 5 kilometers of enemy command ships to make the jammers effective." Captain Tony Mitchell checked his neural enhancement gear one final time as his team prepared to launch from the Liberty's Dawn. His small ship, the Disruptor, was packed with experimental jamming equipment that Dr. Nina Rodriguez had designed specifically for this mission. "Everyone ready?" Mitchell asked his crew of 12 volunteers. Lieutenant Carol Rodriguez gave him a thumbs up from the engineering station, while Commander Luke Hayes tested the communications array that would coordinate their attack with the other teams. "Launch all assault teams," Morrison ordered. 20 small ships shot out from the Alliance fleet like arrows from a bow. Each vessel carried a crew of enhanced humans and enough jamming equipment to disrupt an entire Zephyrian battle group. But first, they had to survive the journey through the most heavily defended space in the galaxy. The main battle began when the two massive fleets opened fire on each other across millions of kilometers of space. Energy beams and missile volleys lit up the darkness between the stars as hundreds of ships engaged in the largest space battle in galactic history. Morrison watched as his heavy ships traded fire with Zephyrian dreadnoughts. The alien vessels were individually more powerful than most resistance ships, but the Alliance had advantages that the enemy didn't fully understand. Enhanced human crews could react faster and coordinate better than Zephyrian collectives that were beginning to show strain after months of defeats. "Enemy super dreadnought closing on our position," Foster warned. "It's the Eternal Dominion, flagship of the Zephyrian High Fleet." Morrison recognized the name. The Eternal Dominion was commanded by Supreme Admiral Kethvar, the most successful Zephyrian military leader in centuries. He was the alien who had conquered Earth and dozens of other worlds. "Signal General Thraktar," Morrison ordered. "Tell him to bring his battle group around to support us." The Draconian general's ships moved into position just as the Eternal Dominion opened fire with its main weapons. The massive energy beams struck the Liberty's Dawn shields, causing the entire ship to shudder under the impact. "Shields down to 60%, reported the engineering officer. "But we're holding." Meanwhile, Captain Mitchell's assault team was threading its way through the Zephyrian battle line. Enemy fighters swarmed around the small ship, but Mitchell's enhanced pilot managed to evade most of their attacks through a combination of skill and the neural interface technology. "Target acquired," announced Carol Rodriguez from her station. "I'm reading the psychic network signatures from the enemy. Command ship, beginning jamming sequence." The experimental equipment aboard the disruptor activated, sending out waves of neural interference that disrupted the psychic connections between Zephyrian ships. Almost immediately, the enemy formation began to waver as individual vessels lost contact with their collective consciousness. "It's working!" Hayes shouted. "Enemy ships are breaking formation. They're having trouble coordinating their attacks." But the victory was short-lived. The Zephyrians had learned from their previous defeats and developed countermeasures. Backup. Communication systems activated throughout their fleet, restoring coordination through technological rather than psychic means. "They're adapting faster than we expected," Mitchell reported to Morrison over the radio. "The jamming is effective, but they're switching to alternative command structures." Morrison realized that the battle was coming down to raw firepower and determination. The neural enhancement technology that had given the Resistance so many advantages was being neutralized by Zephyrian countermeasures. This would be a conventional fleet engagement, ship against ship and crew against crew. "All ships, concentrate fire on their command vessels," Morrison ordered. "If we can take out their leadership, the rest of their fleet will be in chaos." The battle raged for hours across the Polaris system. Ships on both sides were destroyed or crippled, and the space between Zephyr Prime and its moons became littered with debris and escape pods. But gradually, the Alliance forces began to gain ground. The turning point came when General Thraktar's flagship managed to ram and destroy one of the Zephyrian super dreadnoughts. The massive Draconian battlecruiser Vengeance sacrificed itself to eliminate a key enemy vessel, but the explosion was so large that it damaged several nearby Zephyrian ships as well. "Thraktar's ship is gone," Foster reported with sadness in her voice. "But he took half their battle line with him." Morrison felt the loss of his alien ally deeply. Thraktar had been fighting the Zephyrians longer than anyone, and his sacrifice had opened a gap in the enemy formation that the Alliance could exploit. "All ships through the breach," Morrison ordered. "Make Thraktar's sacrifice count." The Alliance fleet poured through the opening in the Zephyrian line, bringing their guns to bear on the orbital defenses around Zephyr Prime. But the enemy wasn't finished yet. From the surface of the crystal planet, a new threat emerged. Overmined was the collective consciousness of the most powerful Zephyrian psionics. It was their ultimate weapon, a mental force that could coordinate thousands of ships and control the thoughts of millions of beings. Now it reached out across space, trying to dominate the minds of the attacking Alliance forces. "I'm reading massive psychic interference," warned Dr. Rodriguez over the communication system from her laboratory ship. "The Overmind is trying to take control of our crews." Morrison felt the alien presence pressing against his mind, trying to overwhelm his thoughts with images of submission and defeat. Around him, his crew struggled against the mental assault as the Zephyrian collective consciousness sought to turn them into slaves. But humanity's neural enhancement technology provided some protection. Enhanced humans found that they could resist the Overmind's influence, though it required tremendous effort and concentration. "All enhanced personnel activate maximum neural shielding," Morrison ordered through gritted teeth. "Don't let them into your minds." The battle became a contest of wills as much as weapons. Human crews, protected by neural enhancement technology, fought to maintain control of their ships while the Overmind pressed its psychic attack. Some vessels succumbed to the mental assault and turned their weapons on their own allies. Others managed to resist and continue fighting. In the end, it came down to Dr. Rodriguez and her understanding of precursor technology. Deep in her laboratory ship, she worked frantically to modify the neural enhancement devices for one final, desperate gambit. "I can use the precursor technology to sever the Overmind's connections," she reported to Morrison. "But it will require me to interface directly with the main amplifier. The psychic feedback could kill me." Morrison realized what she was proposing. Rodriguez would sacrifice herself to break the mental network that held the Zephyrian Empire together. Without their collective consciousness, the aliens would lose the ability to coordinate their vast territories. "Doctor, is there another way?" Morrison asked. "Not that I can think of," Rodriguez replied calmly. "Admiral, it's been an honor working with you and your people. Take care of my daughter." Before Morrison could reply, Rodriguez activated the precursor amplifier aboard her ship. A wave of neural energy spread out from her vessel, invisible to normal sensors, but devastating to psychic networks. The effect on the Zephyrian fleet was immediate and catastrophic. Ships that had been moving in perfect coordination suddenly found themselves. They ruled the galaxy until humanity took it back. Part 8, 5 years had passed since the great battle at Zephyr Prime, and Admiral Morrison stood on the observation deck of the space station orbiting New Geneva, the capital world of the Galactic Liberation Council. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see ships from hundreds of different species coming and going in peaceful trade and cooperation. It was a sight that still amazed him after all these years. "The council meeting is about to begin, Mr. President," said Captain Amy Foster, who now served as his chief of staff. Morrison still felt strange hearing himself called president instead of admiral, but the representatives of the free worlds had insisted on electing him as the first leader of their new government. Morrison nodded and walked toward the council chamber, where delegates from every liberated species were gathering to discuss the future of the galaxy. It had taken 5 years of careful work to build this new civilization from the ruins of the Zephyrian Empire, and there was still much to be done. The council chamber was vast, with seating for over 1,000 representatives from hundreds of different worlds. Draconians sat next to humans, while Karathi delegates conversed with Cephalon ambassadors. The Luminari, beings made of pure energy, flickered and glowed in their special containment fields. It was the most diverse gathering in galactic history. The first item on today's agenda, announced Secretary General Sophie Turner, a former resistance fighter who now helped coordinate the Council's activities, is the final report on reconstruction efforts in the former core systems. Morrison listened as representatives described the progress being made on worlds that had been under Zephyrian rule for centuries. The process of rebuilding was slow and sometimes difficult, but every month brought new success stories. On Altair 4, former slaves had established their own democratic government and were building schools and hospitals with assistance from human engineers. The mining world of Kepler 438b had been transformed from a prison planet into a thriving industrial center where beings of all species worked together as equals. But perhaps the most remarkable transformation had taken place on Zephyr Prime itself. The crystal beings who had once ruled the galaxy were learning to live as just another species among many. Without their collective consciousness to guide them, individual Zephyrians had to make their own choices for the first time in their history. Many of them are struggling with the concept of individual identity, reported Dr. Carol Rodriguez, who had followed in her mother's footsteps to become the galaxy's leading expert on neural technology. But others are embracing their newfound freedom. Some have even joined the Liberation Council as representatives of their own people. Morrison smiled at that news. He had worried that the former enemies would be treated harshly by the species they had oppressed, but the galaxy's new leaders had chosen the path of reconciliation over revenge. "Any word from the exploration teams?" Morrison asked. Commander Rachel Davis stepped forward to give her report. She was one of the youngest officers to hold such a high rank, but her leadership skills had been proven during the final battles of the war. Now she commanded the expeditionary fleets that were exploring beyond the galaxy's edges. "The deep space missions are reporting remarkable discoveries," Davis said, activating a holographic display that showed star charts extending far beyond the known galaxy. "We found evidence of other civilizations in nearby galaxies, some of which may have been visited by the precursors millions of years ago." The implications were staggering. If there were other galaxies with civilizations like their own, it opened up possibilities for trade, exploration, and cultural exchange on a scale that no one had ever imagined. "There's more," Davis continued. "One of our long-range scouts has detected what appears to be a precursor beacon in the Andromeda galaxy. If we can reach it, we might learn more about the beings who left us the technology that made our victory possible." Morrison felt a familiar excitement at the thought of new frontiers to explore. Humanity had always been driven by curiosity and the desire to see what lay beyond the next horizon. Now they had entire galaxies to discover. The engineering teams estimate that building ships capable of intergalactic travel will take at least 10 years, Davis added, but the preliminary designs are promising. After the council meeting ended, Morrison walked through the corridors of the space station, visiting the various departments that kept the new galactic government running. In the diplomatic section, he found former enemies working side by side to resolve disputes between different species. The military command center was staffed by officers from dozens of worlds, all committed to defending the freedom they had fought so hard to win. But it was in the memorial chamber that Morrison spent the most time. The walls were covered with the names of everyone who had died fighting for galactic liberation. Admiral Harper, Colonel Williams, General Thraktar, Dr. Nina Rodriguez, and hundreds of thousands of others who had given their lives for freedom. "They would be proud of what we've built," said a familiar voice behind him. Morrison turned to see Captain Tony Mitchell, who had survived the final battle despite the dangerous mission he had undertaken. Mitchell now headed the Technology Development Division, working to ensure that the advanced systems that had won the war would be used for peaceful purposes. "Sometimes I wonder if we're doing enough," Morrison replied, looking at the endless list of names. "So many people died to give us this chance. I want to make sure we don't waste it." "Look around you, Jake," Mitchell said, using Morrison's first name as he had during their days as young officers. "We've built something that has never existed before, a truly free galactic civilization where every species has an equal voice. That's not wasting their sacrifice. That's honoring it." Morrison nodded, feeling some of the weight of responsibility lift from his shoulders. It was true that they had accomplished something remarkable. The Galactic Liberation Council now governed over 10,000 star systems, each one ruled by its own people according to their own customs and traditions.